Welcome to Aurigny On The Airwaves, a podcast series with me, James Filleul, which takes you behind the scenes of Guernsey's airline, Aurigny. Join us as we meet the dedicated people who make the airline soar, giving the Guernsey community a deeper look into the organisation and its operations. So in this episode, I'm here with Andy Robins, who's the head of flight operations for Aurigny. Clearly, head of flight operations is a critical role for any airline, and we're going to get into some of the detail about exactly what that involves in this podcast. But Andy, look, introduce yourself firstly to us. How did you get into aviation? You're a Guernseyman, so presumably this is where you wanted to work. But tell us a bit about yourself firstly.
Hi, James. Yes, I'm born in Guernsey, and I've lived here for most of my life. I started aviation back in 1989. I was lucky enough to be bought a trial flying lesson at the local aero club. So I went and started that, got hooked, and then bought myself PPL and continued.
That was your private pilot's license?
Yes, private pilot's license. I was working in finance at the time and just made the decision that did I want to be doing this for the rest of my working career or do something which I really enjoyed? So I then started correspondence course to get my commercial pilot's license, and then eventually started a ground. I went to a school in the UK and did the rest of my exams. And then eventually I got a job with KLM UK at the time. And then that's history, really. I've just been in aviation ever since.
It's always a difficult question, but can you put your finger on what is it about aviation that gave you that bug? What is it that's really hooked you?
I think it's a difficult one. There's so many facets of aviation which I enjoy. There is the actual flying. You know, it's such things, simple things as on a really grey winter's day, we take off above the cloud and we're up into the sunshine. And it's being in control of the aircraft. It's all of that sort of stuff.
And there's still enough kind of personal flying involved, because some of the perception, when you're watching, the media, it's all, it's computers and it's all done for you, and it's not actually the pilot flying anymore. That's not true, right?
No, that's not true. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, you just push your button." No, we actually do handle the controls of the aircraft. Yes, we do have an autopilot, but all of our landings are manually handled. So we are there at the controls, flying the aircraft and landing the aircraft.
And what about the connection with Guernsey and with Aurigny?
So the connection was I left KLM to come back to Guernsey to be with my young family at the time. Initially worked for another airline. They closed the base in Guernsey, and Aurigny seemed like a good fit. That was 11 years ago, and I've been there ever since.
And was there any particular reason for that, apart from just love of the island and family were here and this is where you wanted to be based?
Well, working for KLM was great. I had a great experience flying around Europe. But one hotel in an industrial park looks very much like another hotel, and the beaches, and it was just too much of a draw. So I was offered a job at Flybe, as it was then, and took the opportunity to come back.
Okay. All right. Well, look, tell us a little bit about the job. I said it was an important role for any airline, but fill it out a little bit. What does it entail?
So it looks after the operation of the aircraft, effectively. So I'm looking after about 50 pilots and a similar number of cabin crew, and it's to make sure that it's run efficiently, safely, to make sure that we've got the right number of staff, etc. Just the day-to-day operations of actually running the aircraft.
So you're the glue that holds it all together behind the scenes?
Perhaps you could say that.
Okay. All right. Well, look, so there's a lot of topics that I think we need to cover just to give people a real understanding of what goes into your role, which, as you said, is a lot. So perhaps if we start with training and get the pilots that you have and making sure that they have the skills level that you need. So give us a little bit of a flavour of that, because it's not something that people might understand just naturally, the depth of experience and training that goes into sitting in that seat in the aircraft.
Well, if you take first officers, we get first officers from several places. They go through the schools to get their pilot's license, their commercial pilot's license in the beginning. And then once they've gone through a selection process and we've approved them to join us, they'll then go through to a training school which will get them a type rating, so that allows them to fly the actual ATR aircraft. And that's about 30 hours with a training school.
So specifically on the aircraft they're going to be flying
in the simulator,
in and out of
in the ATR simulator. We use an outside company to provide that, and they use simulators either in Dublin, Paris, or Toulouse. That takes about 40 hours. They're then examined by the CAA, and then they come to us, and then we do some more simulator work to our specific procedures, and then they're re-examined by another CAA-approved examiner. And then from there they go to about 40 line training sectors. That's 40 individual flights. And then at the end of that, they're then examined by another in-house examiner to make sure that they come up to our standard. Similarly with captains, so we have two streams of captains, those that have previously flown an ATR and those that haven't. For those that have flown an ATR before, it's usually a quick course of about 20 hours in a simulator, and then they do line training again, so that's training with one of our instructors sat next to them. For those that haven't flown the ATR, then it's a longer process, and they effectively go through the same process as the first officers.
So how long, say it's someone coming in for the first time, how long does that process of training take?
Together with ground training, because they all need to do sort of jumping in the pool and various other ground, it takes about 3 months from the time that they walk in the door to the time that they're online.
Wow, so it's a comprehensive process.
Yes.
And very detailed and very specific for what the activity they're actually going to be doing when they're here.
Yes, absolutely. They are trained to the highest quality, and if we do notice a deficiency, then they're retrained to bring them up to the standard that we require.
So tell us a bit about that then. So once you're trained, it's not then kind of one job, it's done and finished. After that, then presumably you've got a system of monitoring, retraining, checking, requalifying. There's lots of steps.
There are. So once a year they do what is called a line check. That happens for all of our pilots. So they will go and do usually a full flight day, so perhaps to Gatwick twice. And they'll have an examiner on the jump seat for those flights to make sure that they are at the standard they need to be. And then twice a year we have the mandatory training where pilots are sent down to, we usually use Toulouse, and they go through 2 days every 6 months down there. And what that does is that makes sure that the pilots are able to deal with any emergencies that are thrown at them to make sure that they're proficient and safe. Whilst we're there, we also make sure we revalidate their what we call a Cat 2 landing capability. That's bringing it down to minimum of 300 metres and 100 feet.
That's the visibility.
That's the visibility.
So low visibility landings.
Yeah. That's primarily in the UK. And we also revalidate their enhanced vision system. So that's the clear vision system with the cameras on the front.
We're going to talk a bit about that in a second.
Indeed.
Yeah. So how much pressure are they put under through that training? I guess what I'm trying to get to is it kind of ticking the box? It's quite straightforward. They just kind of go through the motions and they do it, or is there a bit more stress involved?
There's quite a bit more stress because if they fail at any point, then that's it. They're either into retraining, or if they can't be retrained, and that does happen. Very rarely it does happen, but then we may say goodbye to them, unfortunately.
Okay, so it's a pressured environment, and it's taken very seriously.
It is.
Does it also involve kind of health checks as well to make sure that they're in full health for operating the aircraft?
We now have a legal responsibility to make sure initially that they are drug tested, as every pilot in the UK is now, and also they have to undergo medicals with a CAA examiner. So initially the new pilots have to go to examiners in London Gatwick, and then subsequently every year they have to go for another test with a locally based CAA approved doctor.
Okay, all right. So a very comprehensive programme and rigorously applied.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move on to, the word that no one in Guernsey really wants to hear, which is fog. Key part, I'm sure, of your planning, particularly at certain times of the year. So we're going to get into how you go about planning a route network out of Guernsey, but let's deal with that weather issue specifically. You talked a bit about, I think it was called fog busting technology, technically called, was it cloud vision?
Clear vision.
Clear vision. Just explain how that works.
So what it is, it's a system of cameras on the front of our 3 owned legacy aircraft, which then go through a computer and projects an image onto the captain's specific headset that he wears for low visibility procedures using EVS. And effectively what happens is the first officer will fly the aircraft, but the captain can see through cloud and can see the runway. He has to become visual, so he actually has to see real world lights out the window at 100 feet above the ground. And what it does is it reduces, so on a normal ILS, instrument landing system approach, which we use when it's inclement weather, we normally require 550. But with this system, that reduces meters of visibility.
Okay.
And with this system, that reduces it to 350 meters of visibility.
So it gives you a little bit more tolerance. You can land in slightly worse weather.
It does. The thing to bear in mind is that that's the system capability. Unfortunately, as we all know, the weather in Guernsey quite often comes way below that 350 metres of visibility. And that in those instances, the clear vision system will not help you.
No, so it's not magic. It will just help you out.
It's an aid.
Okay.
It's an aid to get us to land, get our passengers home, and get ourselves home.
So worth the investment because, as you say, it's not going to work every time.
It is. We've done cost-benefit analysis on it, and it only takes a couple of times that it actually works where we land and we get everybody home, rather than sending an aircraft back to the UK and putting them all in hotels. So it does pay for itself. Yeah,
with all the cost that entails, and with Guernsey crew want to get home too, so yes. It's in their interest as well to get the aircraft in safely if they can.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, broaden it out a little bit. So we talked about some of the difficulties operating in the Channel Islands specifically, but then planning a route out into Europe, how does that work?
So the routes into the UK are basically planned. They're legacy routes we know about. But occasionally we do our routes down to Europe, and it's a case of looking at the location of those routes. We have a limitation on the ATR aircraft that we can't really go over the Alps, so we have to find routes around the Alps, the Pyrenees, which keep us away from the high ground. And then we're looking at the performance and the facilities at these airfields, bearing in mind that we tend to operate these routes during the height of the summer, when we're looking at temperatures up to sort of 30, just above 30 degrees, and that can have a detrimental effect on our performance. So we need to take that into consideration, which does reduce occasionally the numbers that we can take backwards and forwards.
Okay, so you have to take into account the specifics of each airport you're operating into, and that might affect what the schedule, the number of flights you can get in and out, the duration, the turnaround times.
Yeah, the ATR is a nice aircraft. It's not the fastest aircraft, so some of these routes do take a bit of time to get to. So we have to take that all into consideration, make sure that we can fit enough fuel in the tanks and take enough passengers to make it worthwhile. And it's that sort of thing that's taken into consideration, and to ensure that it's a safe route to operate.
Where do you love flying to? What's your favourite?
Probably I'd have to say London City Airport, because it's normally when we make an approach, we use a 3-degree glide path. So from 2,000 feet, it's a 3-degree, and that's what everybody would be used to in coming into Guernsey.
So that's effectively the angle of descent.
The angle. Yes, so that's the angle of descent. Whereas London City is 5.5, it's that much steeper. It's a reasonably short runway, so it takes a bit of skill to go into London City. Initially, pilots are a bit of trepidation because it's unusual. but once you get used to it, it's probably the best place.
Why is that, Andy? Sorry, just for a layman, why is the angle of descent steeper for London City?
It is so that it can avoid the buildings that are surrounding it, because we come right out, especially on the easterly runway, we come right over the centre of London, Canary Wharf, and it's to make sure that we can operate in there safely without hitting anything.
Yeah, of course.
So that's, it's a really interesting place to go into. And I mean, actually, we used to sell tickets. When I worked at KLM, we used to sell tickets for the jump seat, so you could buy the ticket. However, unfortunately, that's no longer available to us, but it is an exhilarating place to go into.
And presumably, if the original landing attempt isn't successful, in the sense sometimes you've got to go around and try again. That's part of London City as well, right?
It is. And for all of the London City operations, every pilot must have gone into the simulator for specific London City training. And then they must have gone into London City with a examiner, effectively, to make sure that they are competent.
So it's a really difficult airport to fly into, but it's your favourite. Can you explain that a bit?
Well, it's not difficult. It's just different, and so it takes. You've got to have your wits about you. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's challenging. You like being challenged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. So look, obviously we talked about one of the peculiarities of operating in and out of Guernsey, which is the weather. Also, in all industries, it's not just aviation. Recruitment for specialist team in Guernsey, in any of the Channel Islands, is not straightforward. How do you go about recruiting the best pilots, first officers, the best talent that you can get for Aurigny, to get them to come and live and work, in a lovely place like Guernsey, but equally, it's not always straightforward for recruitment?
It has. You're right. The recruitment has been tough, and it's shown through other airlines in the UK and around the world. So it has been tough. So we've had to sort of change the way that we recruit staff, and we've been fairly short on captains, and so what we've done is we've tried to open that up, and so now we have a number of pilot captains who are commuting backwards and forwards from their homes in the UK. So that bolsters and that keeps our number of captains up. First officers is slightly easier to recruit them initially. However, the ATR's a really nice aircraft. It's not a jet, and they all want to go and fly a nice shiny jet. So as soon as they've got enough hours, that's it. They're off to the bigger airlines. So we've looked at that, and we've developed this pathway where we're going to take potential first officers from a company called Leading Edge, which is one of the top training schools in the UK, and then we're going to bring them down to Guernsey after we've done all of the examinations that I've previously spoken about. They'll spend approximately 2 years in Guernsey, and then they have a pathway to go and fly Norse 787 aircraft, which means that we keep those first officers perhaps for just a bit longer, but those first officers that join us then have a pathway to go and fly quite a nice large aircraft.
So that should make Guernsey a much more attractive destination for people, not to learn their trade, but to come and work here for a good period of time.
Yeah, it will, and it's a really, from a first officer's point of view, it's a really good place to learn how to fly properly as a first officer, because we are exposed to all sorts of weathers, with fog, winds, etc. And the reason why Norse has come to us for that is because they want first officers with experience of landing in various. Because if you think of 787s going across the Atlantic, it's doing one, the crews are doing a couple of landings each month, whereas if you come down to Guernsey, our crews are exposed to lots of landings in lots of weather.
So lots of landings, lots of different weather, short runway.
Yeah.
So you're learning a lot in a short space of time.
Yes.
Okay. So my questions was going to be for you, what's it like being a pilot in Guernsey? So presumably there's an element of challenge to it, which you quite like.
Yes, I think so. For the companies that I've worked for before, Certainly KLM, I never actually made a go-round, which is a missed approach, so the weather wasn't good enough to land. However, once I'd come back to the island, within a week or two, I was well versed in go-round procedures. So from that point of view, pilots in Guernsey are exposed to the whole gamut of aviation.
So you learn a lot very quickly, and you
Yes.
get very good at operating in slightly more difficult conditions.
You do.
Yeah. So let's maybe move on to that, because you say you've worked for KLM, worked for Aurigny. People might presume that there's some sort of difference in safety between big company, small company, and also operating in a difficult environment. Is it less safe? So safe is a very emotive word in the aviation business. So talk a little bit about those issues.
So we are regulated by the CAA. We come under exactly the same regulations as all of the UK-based operators. A large percentage of our training staff are from other airlines, and so we keep those standards that we've taken from the bigger airlines and we bring them to Aurigny. We are audited to make sure that we're meeting those standards. And so I think we are as safe as anybody else. Obviously, safety just try and promote all the time to make us even safer. But I think we are a match for anybody in the UK.
So size in this sense, it doesn't matter whether it's big company, small company, you're operating the same standards.
Yeah, we operate to the same standards and we demand the same standards as well.
And operating in a more difficult environment like the Channel Islands, that has no implication either, because you're still operating to a set of rigid and standardised rules.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, all right, interesting. If you were trying to talk about Aurigny, both to people locally, perhaps listening to this podcast, or even to people you're trying to bring in to work for the business, how would you describe it? What's it like both being here in Guernsey but also working for a business like Aurigny?
I think there's a pride of people that work at Aurigny. We all want to do the best job that we can for our customers. Occasionally things go wrong, and we hate when that happens, but I think everybody has a pride to make it work, to make it better than it is.
Well, the reason I ask is often, working in aviation, there can be scepticism from the travelling public. You're inconvenienced, you want to get somewhere, you can't get there. It's obviously frustrating. I'm sure, you get as frustrated as anyone else. How would you try and explain to people what you're trying to achieve, that you're trying to make the services as safe as you can and to go as frequently as you can and to look after the people you have?
Yeah, I mean that's probably our whole focus, is trying to make it easy for islanders and visitors to get on and off the island as easy as they can, as safely as they can. Occasionally things will happen where an aircraft will have a technical problem and people will get disrupted, but it's all about safety. We don't go and cancel flights. I mean, if you think that the pilot will end up getting back really late because we've delayed a flight, they don't want to do it. But safety comes down to it, and occasionally, yes, we do disrupt people.
You're a Guernseyman, you work for Guernsey's own airline. What's the difference with Aurigny? What's that essential difference?
Probably it's a small airline. I know virtually everybody in the company, and I think we're all aiming for one goal, which is to make it an efficient, friendly place to work and to get our passengers backwards and forwards.
Andy, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Auringy on the Airwaves with me, James Filleul. Check out the rest of this podcast series to find out more about Guernsey's airline, Aurigny.